So here we go with lesson 1 of this Feldenkrais for Riders series that I'm doing with Vreni Booth. And in this lesson, Vreni is going to talk a little bit about one of the things that she mentioned in her introduction, which was parasitic movement and exactly what that means, because that's quite an important thing to understand. And Vreni will also give an example of a situation where she helped somebody who had a pattern of movement or a habit that was getting in the way of something that she needed to do and causing some discomfort, and how that was resolved. And also looking a little bit at the movement of the pelvis and this relationship between the pelvis and the movement in the rest of the body. And of course this is all highly important for riders because of the influence that it has on the horse. So here's the first of the basic lessons that we're going to start with.
You will hear the word parasitic movement quite often in future on this video, and what it basically means is that we are doing a movement that is not necessary or may even be a hindrance to what we want to do. A very simple example is when people try and open a tight jam jar, something, they often also screw up their face, tighten their eyes, clench their teeth and so on. That does not contribute to the success of opening the jam jar, but it's a habit that they are not even aware of, and that's called parasitic. It goes alongside a movement, but it doesn't contribute, and sometimes it even interferes with the success of the movement. Recently I had a client come who said that when she turns to the left it hurts her neck. She can't go very far, but she has no problem going towards the right. So in the Feldenkrais work, I'm not going to now start treating the muscles on her left or whatever is going on. I'm looking at what is this client doing on the side that is easy, that provides the ease for her. So I show you what she did, and she started turning, intending to look at something, and she turned quite a long way, and then I asked her to turn back equally slowly. On the whole, when we turn, we look with our eyes, then we need the head. If we need to go further, then we need the whole thoracic area, the rib cage, and then comes the pelvis. And you might see that as my hands are on my thighs, near my knees, that there's something going on there. So this client got this movement, she had a feeling for it, she could tell me what she was doing, and then I asked her, now please turn to the left. And she turns to the left. Now she said, I can't go further, it hurts my neck. And I encouraged her not to go further, in fact to go less far, because we don't want her neck to hurt more. And maybe you already can see something in this picture. I'll do it again. That's my client. And she's forcing herself round a bit more, and then the neck hurts, and we don't want repeat pain, so she comes back. Now in that person's awareness, for whatever reason, every pattern has a reason and we don't always have to know why, her lower part of the spine, her lumbar spine, lower back, and therefore the pelvis are involved when she turns towards the right. So there's an even distribution, a spiraling distribution. It starts at the top and then going down, depending on how far she wants to look along the spine. When she goes to the left, she stops below the thoracic, the chest. She doesn't go into the lumbar spine, she fixes that. She wasn't aware of it though. So I had my hands, I was in front of her knees, and I just said, nudge me with one knee, nudge me with the other knee, nudge me with one knee, nudge me with the other knee. And the interesting thing was that she could easily nudge me with her left knee. She had some issue that she couldn't quite figure out. She couldn't nudge me with the right knee. So I said, doesn't matter, just allow me to nudge you and take your left knee back. And hey presto, the right knee comes forward. And she suddenly begins to click. And when I said again, now turn towards the left and just allow me to nudge you, she said, but I can see that far and my neck is not hurting. So the involvement of the whole of the body, sometimes passive because you don't have to go that far, but always ready. Feldenkrais says in every movement the whole of the skeleton should be allowed to be ready to support depending on the size of the movement. And in this case, the client left out the pelvis on the left side for reasons that are not relevant now. Then when she brought the pelvis in and she stopped thinking about having her right knee to come forward, but the left knee goes back, different way of thinking about the same movement often allows the movement to happen, because the struggle of the pattern that she had given herself should not be confronted but addressed differently. So that's an example of how one side can help the other side. Another situation where people find one side turning too easier than the other side is how we actually, apart from bringing the pelvis into rotation, what this rotation looks like. So when I'm turning towards the right, my left sit bone comes forward, my right sit bone goes backwards. The two sit bones stay level. What often happens is, and I go now the other way, that when people turn, they don't realize, they don't just turn, they also pull up the left side. And then they lean on the right side, and then they come back. And because of that turning, the muscles here are used to lift, they can't turn any further. And so that's another restriction. Instead of thinking, actually, as I'm turning, it's simply a turning. So the lifting that could happen is what, again, I refer now back to a parasitic movement that people aren't aware of. And the weight then goes on the right side, with all sorts of consequences. So, can you find for yourself your two sit bones, shaped a bit like the base of a rocking horse, and can you on a chair, you could even have your own hands underneath your sit bones if it's not too uncomfortable, chair not too hard, and turn, and notice, I have that habit a bit, have you got the habit of in one turning to lift a bit? Or to make one side a bit heavier and not on the other side? And can you copy one side to the other side, also the so-called parasitic side? Could you do this? Could you do that? And play with that. That can be quite an interesting discovery. If what I've just said sounds like, well, anything goes, then yes and no. You may remember I mentioned the picture, talked about the picture of we are going shopping to have more options in our larder, that means in our movement computer, our motor cortex. And the more we have, the more our computer has a choice to actually choose what is the most appropriate. Feldenkrais always said that nature has, whatever you want to call it, has given us the best possible option for movement in this vehicle called body on Earth. And if we put as many options back into the nervous system as possible through doing, then the nervous system chooses the best possible combination for what intention we have. So yes, anything goes, but that's just to have all the variations and possibilities there, so that for any given intention we have, the best choices can be made. Ultimately, there's a wonderful phrase by someone called Krishnamurti. He talks of choiceless awareness. When we are really clear, then there's no choice. We just know it, or the nervous system just knows it. Now that all sounds very, very over the top, but we don't have to invent movement. We just have to recognize and have the variety available, and the rest falls into place. The human skeleton can move in basically what I call 3 planes. We have a forward and backward possibility. We have a bending right and left possibility, and we have a rotation to the right, now we see it differently, to the left. And then of course in everyday life one of these possibilities might dominate, but the others are always there to support, and it's never 100% clearly just one thing. In riding, the one clear bone-to-bone contact with the horse is by the pelvis. And the pelvis, like the rest of the body, has exactly the same ability. It can roll backwards and forwards, which of course is crucial in riding. It can tilt, I'll show it like this, tilt left and right. So one sit bone leaves the contact, the other one gets heavier, and then we change over. And it can turn, as I showed earlier, from side to side. These are the 3 options, each having 2 directions. And all 3 are necessary to be available when on horseback. I sometimes call the pelvis a giant vertebra, and all the vertebrae little pelvises, because actually they have to work in harmony. So when I'm rolling this pelvis and my own pelvis backwards and forwards, you can see, and if I do it sideways, that in order to stay balanced, that's the key, my whole spine, i.e. my vertebrae, also do this and do that. They're little pelvises. Oh, this is just a giant pelvis, and this chain up here, which I haven't got, I've only got one vertebra here, is mirroring, again, not as one piece, but in a kind of diminishing way to the top, what the pelvis is doing at the bottom. If I don't do that, and I just say like this, my pelvis is fixed. Then the other thing that happens when the pelvis does this, and here it's my left buttock, I orientate towards myself, in order for me not to fall off, my spine is doing this, the ribs come together a bit more. The pelvis goes like this, my spine goes like that. If I do this, lift my right sit bone, then in order to stay balanced, something has to happen with my spine, and therefore my ribs come together. My head has the choice to stay in the middle, or if I want to bring my head into play, I do this. And again, if I don't respond with my spine to what the pelvis is doing, and I keep my spine like a broomstick, I fall off. And in the third instance, which we have looked at a bit more in detail before, is as I'm turning here, my spine, lumbar spine, thoracic spine, and if necessary, my head begins to turn. And here I just have to say that in everyday life we start turning on the whole with our head, because that contains our senses, the sight, the hearing, the smell, the brain that says I have to go there. In riding, we start with the pelvis. Quite a while ago, one of my sons gave me this book, Keep Your Brain Alive, 83 Neurobic Exercises. And it's incredibly simple, but it's actually tying in very nicely with what we're doing here and what Feldenkrais wanted to do. Earlier on in another video I showed you the interlacing of the fingers this way, that way, the folding of the arms. Now here are simple things you can do. When you get ready in the morning, and most people now wear trousers, which leg do you put in first? And it's so automatic that you don't even think. You can at the same time think about something else or listen to the radio. Can you tomorrow morning stop and say, now I'm starting with the other leg first? And you may find you get into a terrible pickle and might even fall over, so don't do that. When you put your jacket on, your coat on, you probably take one sleeve first. There's nothing wrong with what you have chosen. Could you play with taking the other sleeve first and see how long it takes you, because the neural pathways for one action have been laid down and it's a habit. And if we didn't have habits, we wouldn't know how to leave our house or where the car is or the car keys, so we need habits. But can we play with variations of very familiar things? Here he talks about putting the car keys in handbags, which we all know those who have handbags is a terrible thing. And instead of looking, opening the handbag and looking, just feel. Do it with feeling only. And see how far you can go before you actually tear that handbag apart and want to look. Or something that you always have in the same place in the kitchen, the bowl of sugar or whatever you have, put it somewhere else. And so your own daily habits that are not wrong, but can be varied a bit and jazzed up a bit. See what else you can come up with in your daily life that you could change a little bit. You may want to go back to your original bit, but just these extra actions actually open a bit more of these enormous streets of neural pathways we have, and that might stand you in good stead for all sorts of things. Okay.